I saw that power of attorney document and felt ice in my heart. My own son, my only son on my 75th birthday, handing me a gold pen to sign my own downfall. But sometimes, my son, the greatest lesson of love, comes hidden in the deepest pain. My name is Richard Miller. I'm now 77 years old, born and raised in Bakersfield, California. I've been a farmer my whole life, and later a businessman. I started growing grapes on the property I inherited from my father. Later, I diversified into other fruits. Eventually, I established a fruit distribution company that grew more than I ever expected. I'm retired now, but I still give advice on the business which, thank God, is in hands I trust. Life wasn't easy. I lost my Sarah, my companion of 41 years, almost 6 years ago. Aggressive pancreatic cancer. In 3 months, she was gone, leaving me alone in a house too big for an old man. Our only son, Michael, had flown the nest long ago. He was working in Los Angeles, saying he was building a good career with a big export company. He'd call occasionally, visit during the holidays, and that was it. Loneliness was my companion for a long time. I've worked my entire life since I was a young boy. My fingers are all crooked from working with the hoe, and later with heavy boxes of fruit. I saved every hard-earned penny, bought some land, constructed rental properties, kept a good reserve in the bank, all thinking about the future, a peaceful old age, and what I'd leave to Michael, my only heir. We kill ourselves working, thinking about our children, right? So they can have a better life. And now, before continuing this story, I'd like to thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for giving me the opportunity to share my story. Can I ask you who are watching to subscribe to the channel? Leave your like and comment where you're watching from and what time it is there. Every day there's a new story here from old folks like me who have a lot to share. It's important to value these stories, you know. The voice of experience has much to teach the younger generation, but let's get back to what I was telling you. The day my son tried to deceive me, and how it changed our lives in a way neither of us could have imagined. I was born in 1948 in a simple house on the back of my grandfather's farm. I grew up watching my father wake up at the crack of dawn to tend to the vines. We had a small piece of land, nothing too big, but enough to live on. From a very young age, I was already helping with the work. By 7, I knew how to prune grapevines, recognized different types of grapes, and knew the right time to harvest. My father used to say, "Richard, the land doesn't lie. If you take care of it right, it gives back twice as much." I only studied until the 4th grade. Back then, in rural areas, that was already a lot. After that, it was work. I learned math from the store accounts and reading from the labels on pesticides for the crops. That's how I built my understanding of the world. When I was 18, after my father died of pneumonia, I took over the property. It was just my mother and me. She helped me not to get discouraged when the first harvests resulted in losses due to bad weather. The turning point came when I decided not just to grow, but to sell directly to consumers. I started with a pickup truck, going door to door in Bakersfield and neighboring towns. I woke up at 3 in the morning, loaded everything and went out selling. Later, around 1975, I managed to buy an old van. It seemed like luxury to me. It was my first vehicle, all rusty, but I was proud of it. I could carry much more fruit and go to more distant towns. It was on one of these trips that I met my Sarah. She worked at a bakery in Tehachapi. She always bought my fresh fruit for her pies. One day I offered her a special apple. She bit into it and said, "This apple is sweeter than the others." And I, without thinking, blurted out, "That's because I saved it especially for you." She laughed, blushed, and so did I. Then we started talking more, and within a year we were married. Our life was simple. At first I built a better house on the property, and there we welcomed our Michael in 1982. It was the happiest day of my life. I was already 34, Sarah was 29. We thought children might not come, but he arrived healthy, a crier with a pair of lungs you could hear from the road. Sarah wanted more children, but they didn't come, so we put all our love into Michael. We worked hard to give him everything. When he was 6, I managed to open my first small shop in town, selling fruit from our production and also from other producers in the region. Miller Distribution started small, but it grew. By the time Michael was 12, he was already helping me with the accounts. He had a good head for numbers. Everything we did was with his future in mind. Michael was an intelligent boy who got good grades. Sarah and I decided that he needed to study more than we had. So when he finished middle school, we sent him to a boarding school in Los Angeles. It was hard to be away from our only son, but we knew it was best for him. Every month I set aside the tuition money before any other expense. Sometimes there wasn't enough for other things, but Michael's education was sacred. Then came college. He wanted to study business, and I was so proud. I thought, he'll come back and run the business better than I did. I paid every cent, apartment in the city, books, everything. I worked twice as hard expanding the distribution company. I came to have 3 trucks running throughout the state, delivering the best fruit from the region. During this time, I also started buying some land. Sarah said I was going crazy working so much, but I was only thinking about our son's future. Michael graduated with honors. On the day of his graduation ceremony, I cried like a child. First in the family with a college degree. But then came the surprise. He didn't want to come back to Bakersfield. He got a job at a multinational company in Los Angeles. He said he was going to build a big career, earn good money. At first we were sad, but then we understood. Young people want to see the world, right? And we raise children for life, not for ourselves. Over time, Michael grew distant. He called less and less. Visits were quick. When he came, he talked a lot about business opportunities, big money he was going to make. I noticed a strange gleam in his eyes. It wasn't that sincere joy from before. It seemed more like anxiety, an ambition that gave no rest. In 2010, I expanded the business even more. I bought a larger area for distribution, modernized everything. Sarah's health was already starting to weaken, but she still helped me with the accounts. During this time, I managed to buy 3 houses and 2 apartments to rent out. It was our guaranteed retirement, and of course Michael's future too. When Sarah died in 2019, something changed in Michael. He came for the funeral, of course, but he seemed distant. He barely cried, and the next day he already wanted to know about the papers, the accounts, what his mother had left. That bothered me, but I was so devastated by the loss that I didn't say anything. So I thought it was his way of dealing with the pain. That's when he started showing up more, after years of being almost gone. He called every week, visited once a month, always asking about the business, if I was taking good care of the money, if it wasn't better for him to help me with the accounts. I sensed something wasn't right, but loneliness is a treacherous beast, you know. We accept even crumbs of attention when we're alone. And he was my son, my flesh and blood. How could I suspect him? It was around the end of 2022 when things started to get really strange. Michael called almost every day, asking if I was okay, if I needed anything. At first, I thought it was just a son's concern. I even got emotional, thinking that he was finally valuing family after his mother's passing. But I soon realized there was something more. In one of these calls, he casually dropped, "Dad, what about those apartments in Santa Barbara? Is everything up to date with the tenants? If you want, I can take a look at the contracts for you." I found that strange. I had never told him about those specific apartments. I replied that everything was fine, that I could still take care of my affairs. He changed the subject, but I had a nagging suspicion. Weeks later, he showed up at my house on a Sunday. A rare thing. He never came without notice. He brought barbecue, beer. It seemed like a normal visit. But in the middle of the conversation, he said, "Dad, how's your health? Have you been to the doctor? At your age, you have to be careful." I said I was fine, just with the normal aches of age. Then he said, "I think you should give me power of attorney, you know, so I can handle things if you need to go to the hospital or if something happens." A red flag went up in my head. I changed the subject, but he insisted several other times that day. When he left, I kept thinking, power of attorney for my son who had hardly been interested in my life in recent years. Something was up. The following month, my old friend Arthur, owner of the real estate agency that manages some of my rentals, came to have coffee with me. In the middle of our chat, he dropped, "Richard, your son has been asking about the value of your properties here. He said he was helping you organize your assets." I felt a chill in my stomach. I had never asked Michael to do that. That's when I decided to investigate what was going on. I called Dan, my accountant for over 30 years, and asked him to discreetly look into Michael's activities. Dan was Michael's godfather, knew him since he was born, and had contacts in the city. 2 weeks later, Dan showed up at my house with a grim face. "Richard, Michael's in serious trouble," he said, sitting heavily in the kitchen chair. "What kind of trouble?" I asked, already feeling my heart tighten. "Debts, Richard, big debts. Seems he got involved with risky investments, the kind that promise easy money. Lost everything and worse, borrowed money from dangerous people." Dan explained that Michael had left the multinational company almost 2 years ago. He was trying to get rich quick through speculation. Sold his apartment, his car, everything, and when his money ran out, he started borrowing. The debt, according to what Dan discovered, was over $300,000. I was devastated. My son, my only son, the boy that Sarah and I raised with so much sacrifice, caught in this mess and worse, planning to drag me into it too. That power of attorney story made complete sense now, but I'm one of those old men who doesn't make decisions in the heat of the moment. First I think, then I act. I called Michael and asked how work was going. He made up a story, said everything was fine, that he had been promoted, lie upon lie. I didn't confront him. I wanted to see how far he would go. That's when Dan brought me another disturbing piece of information. A guy named Vincent had approached him wanting information about me, about my assets. He was one of Michael's creditors. Dan, being smart, pretended not to know anything, but managed to get Vincent's contact information. I made a decision that perhaps many fathers wouldn't make. I called Vincent, introduced myself as Michael's father, and asked if we could talk. He was surprised, but agreed. We met at a coffee shop in Santa Barbara, a midway point. Vincent was a man in his 50s, well-dressed, the kind who's used to dealing with big money. "Your son owes me $300,000 with interest accruing," he said without beating around the bush. "And he's already 6 months late. I tried to negotiate, but he just stalls. You know what happens to people who don't pay, right?" The threat was clear, but I kept my calm. "How much is the total with interest as of today?" I asked. He calculated on a calculator. $372,000 and some change. I opened my folder and took out the papers I had prepared. "Mr. Vincent, here is a cashier's check for $380,000, $8,000 more to settle this matter once and for all. But I have one condition." He looked suspicious. I continued. "You are not going to tell Michael that I paid the debt. On the contrary, you will continue to demand payment, threaten as if nothing had changed for another 2 months. I want to see how far my son will go." Vincent smiled slyly. "I understand. Want to test the young man's character. Fair enough. But why would I do this?" I pointed to the check, "for the extra $8,000. And if you agree, we might have other business to do together in the future." We closed the deal right there. Vincent pocketed the check, signed a full discharge of the debt, and promised to keep up the charade for 2 months. I went home with a heavy heart, but determined to discover who my son really was. Meanwhile, Michael intensified his visits and conversations about taking care of my assets. One night he dropped, "Dad, your birthday is coming up, right? I'm going to surprise you." I just answered, "You don't need to do anything, son. Your presence is already a gift." And March 15th, 2023 arrived, my 75th birthday. I already knew that no one would come. My few relatives were far away, most friends had already passed, and Michael had pushed away those who remained in recent months, always saying that I needed to rest whenever someone wanted to visit me. At 6 in the evening, the doorbell rang. It was Michael, smiling with a package in his hand. "Happy birthday, Dad." We went into the living room. The house was quiet, just him and me. I noticed his hands trembling slightly when he handed me the nicely wrapped package with a bow and everything. "Open it, Dad. It's a special gift." I opened it slowly. Inside was a dark blue velvet box. I opened the box and there it was, a golden pen, shiny, with my name engraved. Beautiful, like those you see in jewelry store windows. "Do you like it, Dad? It's a Mont Blanc, one of the best in the world," he said, watching my reaction. "It's beautiful, son. I replied, turning the pen in my hands. It really was an impressive piece. It's for signing in style, Dad, he said with an enthusiasm that seemed forced. You, who always used those simple pens, now deserve something special. He paused and added, Actually, try it here. That's when he took a folded paper from his jacket pocket and placed it on the living room table in front of me. Sign to see how it writes. It's wonderful. It'll glide on the paper. I looked at the paper. It was an official document. At the top, in large letters, was written, General Power of Attorney. My full name was there as the grantor and Michael's as the attorney in fact, with full powers over my assets, accounts, properties, everything. My heart skipped a beat. So this was the grand plan, to make me sign on my own birthday a document that would give him complete control over everything I had built in life. Everything that Sarah and I had accumulated with so much sacrifice, which he could sell, transfer, use as collateral to pay his debts, and leave me with nothing. I looked at Michael. He maintained a smile, but his eyes were different, anxious, calculating. It was no longer my boy's look, but the look of a desperate stranger. I took the golden pen, truly beautiful, ran my fingers over the smooth surface. Michael was standing beside me, watching every movement. Go ahead, Dad, sign down there, he insisted, pointing to the line at the end of the document. All right, I said calmly, holding the pen as if I were going to sign. I saw a gleam of triumph in his eyes, but then, instead of signing my name, I began to write something else. When I finished, I folded the paper and gave it back to him. There, son, the pen is good indeed. Michael looked confused. But you didn't sign in the right place. He opened the paper, eager to see what I had done. That's when his expression changed. His face turned pale. His hands began to shake more violently. Instead of my signature, I had written, Michael, you are my greatest gift and my greatest disappointment. But I still love you, Dad. He looked at me shocked. He couldn't say a word. I stayed calm, looking straight into his eyes. Did you think I wasn't going to read what was written on this paper, son? That I would sign without reading just because the pen is pretty? Michael swallowed hard, began to stammer. Dad, it's not what you're thinking. This is just to make things easier. In case you need something, I raised my hand asking for silence. Michael, I know exactly what this is and I know exactly why you want this power of attorney. I saw panic grow in his eyes. I know about your debts, I know about Vincent, I know everything. He fell, sitting on the sofa. He looked like he had been punched in the stomach. How? How do you know? I'm old, Michael, not stupid. Silence took over the living room. Outside, night was falling. Inside the house, father and son faced each other like two strangers. Finally, he got up, grabbed the crumpled paper, and left without saying a word. He slammed the door hard. I sat there with the expensive pen in my hand on my 75th birthday, completely alone. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything that had happened, about how we had reached that point. Where had I gone wrong in raising Michael? Did we give too much love or too little? What would Sarah say if she were alive? I cried like I hadn't cried since her funeral. The next morning, Dan called me. Richard, Michael went to the notary this morning. He tried to register the power of attorney, but the notary refused, said it wasn't a valid signature. I breathed a sigh of relief. At least that had worked out. What I didn't expect was what happened next. It was around 2:45 in the afternoon when I heard a car stopping in front of my house. I looked out the window and saw Michael rushing out, his face red and wet with tears. He ran to the door and rang the doorbell several times as if it were an emergency. When I opened, he fell to his knees in front of me. He was sobbing like a child. Dad, forgive me, please forgive me. I was paralyzed for a moment. I didn't expect this reaction. I asked him to come in and calm down. I gave him a glass of water that he could barely drink because he was shaking so much. The notary showed what you wrote, he said between sobs. I read it right there in front of him and, Dad, I'm a monster. I sat in my armchair looking seriously at him. Michael, you were going to rob me on my birthday with a gift pen. He covered his face with his hands. I know, Dad, I know. I'm desperate. I owe $300,000. They threatened to kill me if I don't pay by the end of the month. And your solution was to leave me destitute? I asked, keeping my voice calm but firm. Michael continued crying. He seemed to have completely collapsed. All that confident businessman had disappeared. In front of me was a frightened, lost boy. After a while, when he calmed down a bit, I decided it was time for the truth. Michael, I knew about your debts. He raised his head, confused. You knew? Your creditor, this Vincent fellow, approached me. His eyes widened. Vincent talked to you? When? Last month. We had an interesting conversation. Michael seemed unable to believe what he was hearing. And what happened? I got up slowly, went to my office and came back with a folder. I opened it and showed him the receipt signed by Vincent, confirming full payment of the debt. I paid everything, son, last month. Michael stared at the paper, completely stunned. But he called me yesterday, said the deadline was ending, that they would collect in another way if I didn't pay. He lied, I explained calmly. At my request. I wanted to see how far you would go in your desperation. Michael let his body fall heavily onto the sofa. You set this up? I set up a test, yes. I paid your debt, but I asked Vincent to keep pressuring you. I wanted to see what you would do. I did the worst possible thing, he murmured, lowering his head. Yes, you did. Silence took over the room again. Michael stared at the floor, destroyed. I looked at him with a mixture of disappointment and love that only a father can feel. Why did you pay my debt? He finally asked in a weak voice. Because I was going to tell you on your birthday, but you tried to rob me on mine. That seemed to hit Michael like lightning. He started crying again, this time harder. Dad, I'm trash. I got up and approached him. No, you're my son, lost in desperation. I sat next to him on the sofa. It was time to explain. Michael, when I found out about your debts, I was devastated. Not because of the money, but because you hadn't trusted me. Because you had lied all this time. Because you didn't come to me when the problems started. He wiped his tears with his shirt sleeve. I was ashamed, Dad. You and Mum killed yourselves working to give me an education, opportunity, and I threw it all away. How could I come here and say that I had lost everything on stupid bets? Bets? I asked, surprised. Dan had mentioned risky investments. Michael confessed everything. It had started with small sports bets online. He won a few times, thought he had a gift. He increased the bets, started losing. To recover, he bet even more. Sold his car, then his apartment. When his own money ran out, he started borrowing. First from friends, then from loan sharks like Vincent. Every day I sank deeper, he explained, now calmer. I thought, just one more bet, and I'll recover everything. But I never recovered, and the debts just kept growing. And the story with the power of attorney? He lowered his head, ashamed. It was Mark's idea, a friend. He said it was the only way out, that I would get the power of attorney, sell some of your properties, pay the debts, and then over time I would recover everything and you wouldn't even miss it. I shook my head in disbelief. And you thought that would work? That I wouldn't notice that my properties had disappeared? I wasn't thinking straight, Dad, he admitted. I was desperate, scared. Vincent is not someone to mess with. I've seen what he does to people who don't pay. I remained silent for a while, processing all that. My son had hit rock bottom, had almost dragged me down with him, but for some reason I couldn't feel anger, only sadness and a strange relief for finally knowing the truth. Do you know why I wrote that on the paper instead of calling the police? I asked. Michael looked at me confused. To humiliate me? No, son. To remind you that even at your worst, I still love you. It was too much for him. Michael completely broke down, stood up and hugged me, crying like I had never seen before. A purifying cry from someone who is finally facing their own demons. We stayed like that for a long time, father and son, reconnecting after years of emotional distance. When we finally separated, Michael took the crumpled power of attorney paper from his pocket. He tore it into small pieces in front of me. This will never happen again, Dad. I swear on Mum's memory. I nodded. I wanted to believe him. Really wanted to, but I knew that a promise made in the heat of emotion doesn't always hold when the dust settles. Michael, "You need help," I said firmly. "It's not just the debt that was paid. It's the gambling addiction that needs to be treated." He agreed, head down. "I know, Dad. I know." "I have a proposal for you," I said after a few moments of reflection. "Come back home, to Bakersfield. Come work with me at the distribution company, starting from the bottom, learning everything again. And alongside that, you'll get treatment for your addiction." I saw a glimmer of hope appear in his eyes. "You would give me that chance after everything?" "One chance, Michael, one." That same afternoon, we made a formal agreement. I wrote it by hand, as I do with all my important contracts. Michael would return to live in the house where he grew up. He would work at the distribution company with a modest fixed salary. He would participate in a support group for people with gambling addiction and would not have access to any company bank accounts for the next 2 years. In exchange, I wouldn't tell anyone about the attempted fraud. I would pay for a small apartment for him in town, since the big house where I lived had too many painful memories of his mother, and most importantly, I would give him the opportunity to rebuild his life and our relationship. Michael signed the agreement with the golden pen he had given me, an irony that didn't go unnoticed by either of us. The next day, I called Vincent to thank him for keeping our arrangement. He laughed on the other end of the line. "You're one of those who teaches through pain, huh, Mr. Miller? Your son got the lesson he needed." "I hope so," I replied, "and our deal still stands. If you need an investor for some serious and honest business, look me up." "I'll do that," he replied, seeming genuinely interested. A week later, Michael moved back to Bakersfield. The first days were strange, tense. The employees at the distribution company looked suspiciously at the boss's son, who had never shown interest in the business before. But Michael surprised everyone, including me. He arrived before everyone else, left after, carried boxes, drove trucks, made deliveries, talked with customers, used the business knowledge he had from college to suggest improvements, but always with humility, never imposing. After the first meetings of the support group, he would come back with his head down, embarrassed. But over time, he began to talk more about the sessions, about the other participants, about how he was learning to control the urge to gamble. 1 month turned into 2, then 6. Michael remained firm in the agreement, never asked for money beyond his salary, never complained about the heavy work. Gradually, I gave him more responsibilities. First, the delivery route, then contact with suppliers. Finally, I let him start participating in the company's financial decisions, always under my supervision. A small town is a challenge for those with secrets. Soon there were gossips about why Michael had returned, why he had left his good job in the city. Some said he had gotten into trouble with a married woman, others that he had been fired for incompetence. Michael listened to it all quietly, never defended himself. "Let them talk, Dad," he would tell me. "What matters is what we know." The family also reacted. My sister Betty, who lives in Fresno, came to visit as soon as she heard about Michael's return. "What happened to him, Richard?" she asked, concerned. "He looks worn out, thin." I just replied that he had gone through a difficult period and was recovering. Betty, smart as always, realized there was more to this story, but respected my silence. The real test came when Dan, my accountant and confidant, became seriously ill. We needed someone who understood the finances of the distribution company to temporarily replace him. Michael was the obvious choice. I hesitated, but decided to trust. "Michael, I'm going to give you access to the company accounts for a month while Dan recovers. I trust that you will honor our agreement." I saw the weight of that trust in his eyes. "I won't disappoint you again, Dad. Never again." And he kept his word. He managed everything with competence and transparency. When Dan returned, he praised Michael's work without knowing the whole story behind it. It was during this period that I noticed the real change. It wasn't just the abstinence from gambling, nor the dedicated work. It was something deeper. Michael had regained an inner peace that I hadn't seen since he was a teenager. The anxious look, always seeking the next conquest, had given way to a serenity of someone who values the present moment. 2 years have passed since that fateful 75th birthday, 2 years of reconstruction, reconciliation, daily learning. Sometimes, when I look out the window of the distribution company office and see Michael coordinating the loading of the trucks, I still find myself thinking about how close we came to losing everything. Not just the material assets I built with so much sweat, but especially the father-son bond that almost broke for good. There are days I still wake up startled, with a tight heart, remembering that shiny golden pen and the power of attorney paper. The scare is so real that I need to breathe deeply to calm myself. But then I hear Michael in the kitchen, preparing coffee early before we go together to the distribution company, and the anguish passes. It's like my father used to say back when I was a kid, "Time doesn't heal everything, son, but it teaches us to carry the burdens more skillfully." The first months after that day were the hardest. Michael was ashamed to look me in the eyes. He would lower his head when we crossed paths in the company corridors, ate quietly, spoke little. I understood. Shame is a weight that each person needs to learn to carry in their own way, in their own time. But gradually things started to change. Michael fulfilled every line of our agreement to the letter without complaining once. He worked harder than everyone else, was the first to arrive, the last to leave. On days with heavy rain, when the dirt roads got bad and the more experienced drivers refused to make deliveries to certain places, he was the one who took the wheel and went. "You don't need to prove anything to me, son," I would say, concerned about that almost obsessive dedication. "It's not for you that I need to prove, Dad," he would respond. "It's for myself." He never gambled again, as far as I know. And look, I kept an eye on him at the beginning. He still goes to the support group meetings to this day, every Wednesday night in Santa Barbara. It's almost a 40-minute drive, but he never misses it. At first, he would go with his head down, come back with red eyes. Now he goes with a different posture, no longer as someone who needs help, but as someone who helps others who are beginning to walk the same difficult path. I've seen him bring home some younger guys, desperate with gambling debts, and talk for hours on the porch having coffee and showing them that there is a way out. "This is my dad," he always introduces me with a voice full of pride that I had never noticed before. He taught me that we can always start over. The distribution company flourished in these 2 years like never before. Michael brought new ideas, modernized many things that I, with my old-fashioned mind, would never have thought of. He created an online sales system, set up partnerships with organic producers in the region who were without distribution channels, opened a line of deliveries directly to people's homes in larger cities. "Dad, there are a lot of people who want quality fruit but don't have time to go to the market," he explained to me when he proposed this idea that I thought was crazy at first. "We can bring it to them directly." Of course, old folks are suspicious of new things, but I let him try, and wouldn't you know it worked. The profits of the distribution company practically doubled in these 2 years. And best of all, we hired 10 more employees from the region, people who needed jobs, family men who now have formal employment, and a decent salary at the end of the month. The golden pen? Yes, I still have it. I keep it in a small locked box in the drawer of my desk. Not out of resentment, far from it. I keep it to never forget how a beautiful gift can hide a bad intention, and also how a serious mistake, when faced head-on, can open the way for a greater redemption. At the beginning of this year, when we completed 2 years of our agreement, I sat with Michael on a Sunday afternoon and showed him all the company and property papers. It was a long conversation that lasted until the early morning. I explained each investment I had made throughout my life, each bank account, each decision I had made in business, from the good to the bad. I showed him the mistakes I had made and how I learned from them. He listened attentively, making notes in a small notebook, asking about the reasons for each choice. It was no longer that self-interested curiosity from before, from someone who just wants to know how much each thing is worth. It was genuine interest from someone who wants to learn to manage responsibly what one day he will inherit. "Dad, how did you manage to accumulate all this coming from practically nothing?" he asked me one night as we reviewed the property documents. "It wasn't from nothing, son. I received the land from my father, who received it from his father. It was a small thing, but it was a start. What made the difference was never spending more than I earned and always thinking about tomorrow." Michael smiled sideways, a bit embarrassed. "Exactly what I didn't do, right? Always thinking about now, immediate pleasure, without calculating the consequences." "Generation gap, maybe," I replied, trying to ease the weight of those words. Or perhaps because I lived in harder times, where there was no margin for error. When you go hungry once in your life, you never forget that pain. We remained silent for a while, each with his thoughts, looking at the starry sky through the window. It was one of those clear nights in the countryside, without the light pollution of big cities. The stars seemed closer, almost within reach. Then Michael surprised me. "You know, Dad, that message you wrote on the power of attorney, I kept the pieces." I looked at him surprised. "You kept them?" "Yes. I glued it all back on a sheet. It's framed in my room. Every day when I wake up, it's the first thing I see." I felt a lump in my throat. That boy I thought I had lost to the world was there in front of me, more mature and sensitive than I had ever imagined he would become. "Why, son?" "To never forget that true love sometimes needs to say no, needs to be tough, and that even when we make serious mistakes, we can still be loved." At that moment, I understood that my son had really changed. It wasn't just appearance. It wasn't just to please me temporarily or to gain access to what is mine. It was a deep change, the kind that only comes after we face our own demons and win. I remembered a conversation I had with Vincent about 6 months after that birthday. He had called me to ask if I would be interested in investing in a business of his. We ended up talking about Michael. "How's the young man?" he asked. "Did he learn his lesson?" "He's on the right track," I replied, "working hard, paying the price for his mistakes." "You were tough, but fair," Vincent commented. "I've seen many parents forgive too easily and later regret it. Forgiveness without consequences teaches nothing." Those words stayed with me. Forgiveness without consequences teaches nothing. Perhaps that was what I did, right amid so many mistakes I made in raising Michael. I forgave, but not before establishing a clear path to redemption. Last month, after much reflection, I made an important decision. I called Michael, Dan, and Betty to the distribution company office on a Friday afternoon. I placed on the table the documents I had prepared with Dan's help. "Michael, these papers transfer 49% of the shares of Miller Distribution to your name," I said, pushing the folder toward him. I saw his eyes widen. For a moment, it reminded me of that 10-year-old boy opening the Christmas present he wanted so much. "But Dad, we had agreed that you would only receive it when you passed away." "Yes, that was the plan. But plans change. You showed your worth in these 2 years. You deserve to be more than an employee." Michael leafed through the documents, reading each line carefully. Then he came to the part that talked about the value. "Wait, it says here that I have to pay for these shares." I nodded. "It's not a gift, Michael. It's an opportunity. You'll pay with the money you've saved in these 2 years of work. I know you've saved almost all of your salary." His expression changed. It wasn't disappointment as I feared. It was respect. "Thank you, Dad. It means much more this way." We made sure to register everything legally with a contract signed in front of Dan and Betty as witnesses. It was a solemn, important moment, a milestone in our relationship. "Why only 49%, Dad?" Michael joked on the occasion. "Don't you trust me enough to give me exactly half?" I smiled back, understanding the joke. "I trust you, son, but I want you to earn every percentage point. When I'm gone, the rest will be yours by right. But until then, I want you to feel the value of every little piece of this company." He understood perfectly. There was no resentment in his question, just that good humor that had gradually returned in our daily coexistence. The playful Michael from childhood, who had been lost sometime in adulthood, was back. People in town noticed the change. Bakersfield isn't big. Everyone knows each other. Everyone comments. The Michael of today is respected, greeted on the streets. The young man who returned defeated from the city has transformed into a competent businessman, a dedicated son, a man of his word. In the beginning, when he returned, gossip ran wild. "He must have done something really bad in the city," some said. "He's coming back with his tail between his legs," others commented. Michael listened to everything quietly. He never defended himself, never explained. He just kept working day after day. With time, the malicious gossip gave way to admiring comments. "The young man has his father's knack for business," I hear in the coffee circles on Sunday after church. He has a head for business just like Mr. Miller. My house, which had seemed too big and empty after Sarah passed away, now has life again. Michael still lives in the small apartment I rented for him downtown. It was part of our initial agreement, but he has dinner with me almost every night. Sometimes he brings friends. Sometimes it's just the two of us reminiscing about old stories, talking about the future. About 3 months ago, at one of these dinners, he arrived with a young woman I had never seen before, tall, with brown hair, a serene look. "Dad, this is Claire," he introduced with a certain nervousness in his voice. "She's a teacher at the public school." Claire greeted me with a spontaneous hug that I could feel was sincere. During dinner, I noticed how she looked at Michael with affection, and how he seemed different around her, lighter, happier. "We're in a serious relationship, Dad," he told me after she left. "For 2 months now. I wanted to be sure it was serious before introducing her to you." A serious relationship, the same words I used when I introduced Sarah to my parents back then. I patted him on the shoulder. "She seems to be a woman of value, son." Since then, Claire has become a constant presence at our dinners. She has a calm way of speaking, of explaining things. As an English teacher, she knows many stories, has an opinion about everything, but she's never arrogant or imposing. She listens with genuine attention when I talk about the old stories of Bakersfield, about the changes I've seen in the region throughout my life. One night after Michael left to get dessert at the bakery, I was alone with her. I took the opportunity to ask how they had met. "It was at the support group," she told me, surprising me. "My brother had problems with gambling, just like Michael. I used to accompany him to the meetings. That's where we got close." "So you know," I began, not knowing how to finish the sentence about his past. "Yes, he told me everything, including about that birthday and the power of attorney." She paused, looking out the window. "Your son is a brave man, Mr. Miller. Few would have the strength to start over the way he did. When they're together, I see in Michael's eyes that peace that only true love brings. It's the same look I used to see in the mirror when I was with Sarah. Who knows, maybe soon the grandchildren she dreamed of will come. Claire has the manner of someone who would be a dedicated mother. And Michael? Well, I'm sure he wouldn't repeat the mistakes I made. He would be a more present, more attentive father. Yesterday I turned 77. Unlike that 75th birthday, the house was full. Betty came with her husband and the nephews who live far away. Dan and his wife brought a huge cake. The older employees of the distribution company showed up after work. Neighbors, long-time friends, people I didn't even expect to see again. Michael and Claire organized everything without my knowledge. When I got home after work, thinking it would be just another ordinary day, there they all were shouting, "Surprise!" In the middle of the party, with the room full of people talking, laughing, eating the treats that Claire and Betty had prepared, Michael asked for silence and raised a toast. "I want to make a toast to my father," he began, his voice breaking with emotion. "The wisest and most generous man I know, who taught me that there is always time to start over, even when we think everything is lost." He paused, seeking my gaze in the room. Our eyes met, his watery, mine too. 2 years ago I was at rock bottom, lost, desperate, willing to betray the trust of the only person who always believed in me. There was a silence in the room. No one but us knew exactly what he was talking about, but everyone felt the weight of those words. But instead of turning his back on me as I deserved, my father gave me a lesson that changed my life. He taught me that true love isn't just hugs and nice words. It's also firmness, it's accountability, it's responsibility. Michael raised his glass higher. "To you, Dad, who gave me life twice, once when I was born, and again when you saved me from myself. I love you more than anything." I couldn't hold back the tears. I hugged my son tightly, like I hadn't hugged him since he was a boy. Looking around, seeing all those people who are part of my life, feeling my son's strong embrace, I thought of Sarah. How happy she would be to see our family restored, our son back on the right path. "Your mother would be proud of you," I whispered in his ear. Later that night, when everyone had already left and only Michael remained helping me clean up the mess, He handed me a small package. "Another gift, son? I've had enough celebration for one day," I commented half-jokingly. "Open it, Dad. This one is different." I unwrapped it carefully. It was a small hand-carved wooden box, fine work. Inside was a pen. It wasn't golden or luxurious like that one from the 75th birthday. It was a simple pen, made of dark wood, with my name engraved. "I made it myself," he explained. "I learned woodworking at the community center classes. The wood is from an oak that fell on Uncle Arthur's property during last month's storm. Wood that survived, that will have a new purpose." I took the pen, feeling its weight in my hand. It was perfect, not for its material value, but for its symbolism. "To replace that other one," Michael completed without needing to explain more. "For you to write a new story. Our story." Life takes turns, doesn't it? Sometimes the worst moment can be the beginning of the best phase. That power of attorney that should have been my downfall ended up being the turning point for a deeper and truer relationship with my son. The failed scheme opened the way for a trust we had never had before. Last Sunday I woke up early and went to the cemetery to visit Sarah's grave, as I do every month. I brought flowers, cleaned the headstone, and for the first time in a long time, I spoke to her without crying. "Our son found his way, Sarah. It took time. It had ups and downs, but he found it. And I also found a new way of being a father, less controlling, more of a partner. You would be proud of both of us." On the way back home, I passed by the church. Mass was being held. I went in and stayed in the back. The priest was talking about forgiveness, about how difficult it is to truly forgive, not just with words, but with the heart. "Forgiveness is not forgetting," he said. "It is remembering without resentment." That kept echoing in my head. Remembering without resentment is what I've been trying to do. I remember that day, that power of attorney, that golden pen, but I no longer feel that pang in my chest, just gratitude for having found a way back to each other. If there's one thing I've learned in these 77 years, it's that nothing happens by chance. Difficulties appear to teach us something. Michael's betrayal taught me that even when loving someone, we need to establish clear boundaries. Blind trust can be as destructive as unjustified distrust. And to him, that episode taught him that the shortest path to success usually leads to a cliff. As the old saying goes here in the South, shortcuts make for long delays. Shortcuts in life rarely work. You need to travel the entire path with its curves, ascents and descents to truly arrive where you want. Today I look to the future with hope. The distribution company is in good hands, mine and Michael's, working together. My son has found his way and a partner who complements him. And I, who thought I would spend my last years in solitude, find myself surrounded by good people. Purpose, joy, renewed each day. The golden pen is still kept in the drawer. The new wooden pen stays on my desk. I use it every day. Sometimes I think about throwing the golden one away, leaving the past behind for good, but something tells me to keep it. Not as a symbol of hurt or betrayal, but as a reminder that sometimes we need to write something different from what is expected of us to change the course of history. As Sarah used to say when something went wrong, God writes straight with crooked lines. Perhaps that whole painful situation was necessary for us to get where we are today. Perhaps without that rock bottom, Michael would never have found the strength to truly change, and I would never have learned to be the father he needed. Not the father who gives everything, but the father who teaches, who sets boundaries, who believes in his son's ability to rise again. If you've made it this far, I thank you from the bottom of my heart. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. And if you really followed me to the end of this journey, comment below the word mistake. Only those who watched will understand the significance of these two pens. One that almost destroyed everything, another that symbolizes our new chance. I thank the Grandpa's Voice channel for this opportunity to share my story. Maybe the next one will be even more similar to yours. A tight hug from this old man here, who learned that forgiveness is not weakness, but the greatest strength we can have.